Here's a fun thought. If web developers went extinct tomorrow, half the internet would collapse, and the other half would look exactly the same.
Which honestly raises some questions. People talk about web development like it's this noble, ancient craft, a heroic journey, a digital pilgrimage. But the most heroic thing I've ever seen a web developer do is fix a bug by switching browsers, not fix the code. Just try a different browser, like they were choosing a different cereal. And every time someone in my life says, "I'm learning to code," what they really mean is, I can now Google how to center a div with more precision than a Navy sniper. Half the time, they're updating Shopify themes. The other half, they're arguing with Chrome DevTools like it owes them money. It's funny how people frame web dev as this safe, recession-proof path, like you're choosing a career in accounting or dentistry. Meanwhile, every developer I know talks about their job the way you talk about a haunted house you accidentally bought. And the best part? Almost all my friends who went into coding used to be DJs. Apparently, trading turntables for Tailwind is a natural evolution, and somehow that didn't make things worse. If anything, their debugging playlists improved. But hey, this reputation web development has, this shiny, respectable glow, it's strong, almost too strong, which makes me wonder why people think the field is still so valuable, or at least valuable enough to keep Googling that div thing like it's a family curse. Here's a question nobody likes asking out loud. Is the job market actually good? Or are we all just believing whichever YouTube thumbnail shouted the loudest today? Because according to one report, web dev roles grew 8%. According to another, they shrank 12%. And according to my cousin, there's a guy who can get you hired in 48 hours, but you do need to own a fog machine for vibes. Every chart about tech jobs in 2026 looks like an EKG monitor. Sharp peaks, sudden drops, and somewhere a doctor saying, "We'll keep an eye on it." One graph I saw literally had a dip labeled ChatGPT panic. Not even subtle. And sure, there are companies hiring. Meta wants front-end engineers again, which sounds exciting until you read the job description. It's a lot of must enjoy React, followed by several sentences that feel like they were written by someone going through a breakup. Comfortable with ambiguity, emotionally adaptable, willing to pivot. It reads less like a job listing and more like someone processing a text they shouldn't have opened. After a while, you realize the market isn't the problem. The problem is trying to make sense of the market, which is why the next question isn't how many jobs exist, but what do these people actually do all day? Picture this. You sit down at your computer, ready to build something powerful and elegant. 30 minutes later, you're Googling the phrase, "Why is my div like this?" with the same emotional energy as someone Googling symptoms at 3 a.m. That's web development. It's not a mystery. It's a scavenger hunt where the prize is functioning code, and the punishment is also functioning code, but you don't know why. At the base level, you've got HTML and CSS, the digital Lego set. Except imagine a Lego set where the pieces quietly rearrange themselves if you look away for too long. You change one line of CSS, and suddenly the footer thinks it's the header, and the header has relocated to the moon. Then you climb up to JavaScript. JavaScript is for when your website wants to argue back. It's the part of the job where you feel like you're negotiating with a very stubborn roommate who refuses to do anything unless you say the magic words in the right order. And even then, it occasionally throws a tantrum just to keep the relationship interesting. And of course, the frameworks. React is your cryptic cousin who speaks in riddles and expects you to keep up. Vue is the friendliest barista you've ever met. Soft smile, perfect hair, handing you a project structure that just makes sense. Angular is the guy who shows up to brunch with a binder, a plan, and a strong opinion on TypeScript interfaces. But all roads lead to debugging. Debugging is where you become a detective investigating a crime you definitely committed but have no memory of. You're staring at a console error like it's a ransom note. You're retracing your own steps like a suspect. And then, somehow, it fixes itself when you're not looking. The case closes. Justice is not served exactly, but the page loads. And once you've survived all that, a question naturally pops up. Is the suffering at least profitable? Here's the thing about developer salaries. They're impressive right up until the moment you realize you still can't afford an apartment with walls. Junior, mid-level, senior. It's like ordering off a menu at a restaurant where everything looks delicious and also costs your entire paycheck. Ah yes, I'll have the mid-level salary with a side of dental, please. No, I can't afford water. People love asking, do web developers make good money? And the honest answer is, Yes, kind of. Senior dev salaries in particular are like avocados. Expensive, inconsistent, and nobody can explain why they're sometimes twice the price for the same thing. But when they're good, they're really good. You feel it in your soul and your toast. Of course, everything shifts depending on where you live. Some cities pay double, but they also charge you rent that could bankrupt a medium-sized kingdom. And remote work helps, if you don't mind your coworkers living in 3 different time zones and having meetings at hours normally reserved for raccoons. But the money conversation always leads somewhere predictable. After you know what you can earn, the next thing you wonder is what you're actually signing up for versus the fantasy version you built in your head. Imagine the coolest hacker movie you've ever seen. Glowing screens, code flying past like you're defusing a bomb. Maybe there's a dramatic bass drop. Now erase all of that and replace it with a single developer hunched over a laptop, whispering, "Why is there extra padding?" Like it's a confession. That's the real job. Everyone starts with the fantasy. You picture yourself building sleek apps, maybe launching the next big platform. Maybe wearing a hoodie in a dimly lit room while doing something that looks illegal, but inspirational. Then the actual day arrives, and you spend most of it closing pop-up cookie banners you're supposed to be fixing. GDPR 3.0 comes out, and suddenly you're updating a modal that absolutely refuses to center itself. A theme in this profession. And the funny thing is, social media makes it worse. Those day-in-the-life influencers, they code for maybe 8 minutes. Then they journal about their intentions, pour iced coffee for 16 slow-motion seconds, and walk their dog. Meanwhile, real developers are in the trenches, with 47 Stack Overflow tabs open, 2 of which are identical and neither of which contain the answer. At some point, you stop chasing the fantasy and start chasing the fix that gets your build to stop screaming. And when that happens, you naturally start to wonder, given all this, is becoming a web developer in 2026 actually a good idea? Here's a bold statement. Web development in 2026 is kind of like dating apps. Technically it works, lots of people are doing it, and yet everyone involved feels a little confused and mildly exhausted. But we keep showing up anyway. If you want the honest answer, yes, it's still a good career. Stable-ish, high-paying-ish, future-proof-ish. Everything about tech comes with an ish now. Even job titles. I met someone last week who called themselves a front-end experience curator. They write buttons. That's the whole job. But the chaos is part of the charm. The field changes constantly, but not in a clean, inspirational way. More like someone shaking an Etch-a-Sketch every 6 months and yelling the word update. One day, you're learning a new framework. The next day, that framework is deprecated. But don't worry, there's a new one that promises to solve all the problems created by the last one. It won't. But the optimism is adorable. And sure, the work can be messy, but it's still necessary. The web keeps growing. Companies keep needing people to build things, and every developer keeps pretending they fully understand what hydration means in React. Nobody does. We're all just nodding through meetings like we're in a foreign film with no subtitles. So yes, it's a good career, as long as you're okay with a little chaos. Maybe a lot of chaos. But hey, chaos disguised as productivity is basically the job description anyway. And once you accept that, the only real question left is what this whole ride has been building toward. Because every chaotic journey deserves a dramatic finale. If you want to know what being a web developer really feels like, picture that heroic moment from earlier, the one where someone fixes a bug by switching browsers, and understand this. That's the pinnacle. That's the summit of Mount Web Dev. Everything else is slipping down the side of the mountain while holding a granola bar and whispering, "Please just build." The funny thing is, after all this talk about markets and money and debugging crimes you committed against yourself, I'm still not sure if web development is a good career. But it is a career. And honestly, in 2026, that alone makes it feel like an endangered species worth protecting. Because web dev is a strange profession. One minute you're a digital architect. The next minute you're fighting a layout issue so petty it could air on daytime television. And somehow both of those tasks pay the same hourly rate. But the truth is, the job sticks with you. It's frustrating and fascinating and occasionally makes you feel like a wizard who learned all the spells phonetically. And every once in a while, you fix something. Maybe by changing one line, maybe by switching to Firefox. And for a moment, you feel unstoppable, or at least functional. So if you do jump into web development, congratulations. By the end of your first month, you'll finally know how to center that div. Probably.